So good evening to you all, and welcome to the annual meeting. I want to start by saying I'm very proud to be on the stage as a PFLAG board member, and I'll go into why. But before I do, I want to just say a couple of things. We could not do the work we do without our tremendous staff. And I can't say that enough times, so I just want to say to all of you, we are blessed and fortunate to have you. So I just want to say thank you again. And then a personal note of thanks to Gene Hodges, who has been someone whose leadership and passion for diversity and inclusion and outreach to persons of color in the LGBT community has been, in my view, unparalleled. I am an executive on Wall Street, and I do, in addition to my work as a regulator, do a lot of diversity and inclusion work. And whether you're in corporate America, nonprofit, or academic, when you're talking about diversity, inclusion, and outreach, one of the common threads is it does not succeed unless someone at the top sets the tone, models the behavior, and Gene has just been that type of leader for the organization. Gene, as a person of color, I just want to tell you thank you. I am deeply indebted to you, sir. I just want to say thank you. So why am I here? Well, and again, with Gene's leadership. So Gene sent me an email about 3 weeks ago, and she said, Robert, would you mind saying a few words at the annual meeting? And I said, sure, Gene, for you, no problem. You ask, I'm there. Last week I asked her, well, what do you want me to say, and how much time do you want me to spend? And she said, spend as much time as you want. You're the featured speaker. So, so I'm not going to spend as much time because I just want to briefly touch on a couple of things. One, my personal story, why I'm here. Also want to just kind of remind us why PFLAG should be involved with outreach to the community of color, because I think too often we kind of miss that focus. Talk a little bit about what PFLAG has done over the past 4 years, in large measure due to Gene's leadership, but also due to a tremendous board. I tell people frequently, this is the board, and I'm on a number of boards that I enjoy the most, hands down. And also, the last thing I just want to note is challenges we face in this outreach effort and things we can think about. So, why am I here? Well, I obviously am a person of color. I have been my entire life committed to equality. Just to put things in perspective, it was not too long ago where persons of color could not stay in this hotel that we're having this meeting. The only thing we could do was actually serve white people. We couldn't stay. So, and that was not too long ago. So things like that and other things I can talk about leave an impact on me, have left an impact on me, and a part of my makeup and why equal justice is important. More importantly, for PFLAG, I am the proud father of a gay African-American man. Fortunately, because of who I am, when my son came out, frankly, it was not a traumatic experience. It was more of an issue for him, to be very candid. But my biggest concern, and it continues today, as an African-American male in this society, I worry about his safety. I worry about his safety in the community at large, and quite frankly, I worry about his safety within his own community. So that is a driver for me to be involved in an organization like PFLAG, and The main reason I'm here, and I owe a debt of gratitude to one of our outgoing board members, Dale Bernstein, who's a dear friend, who we worked many years together at the New York Stock Exchange on diversity and inclusion efforts, and Dale was a leader here. We worked side by side, implementing many positive changes at the New York Stock Exchange at a very pivotal time in the stock exchange's history. Dale reached out to me, and frankly, I did not know a lot about PFLAG, but if Dale was involved with it, and after we talked, I said, sign me up. And frankly, from the day that I decided to become involved with PFLAG, I haven't regretted it. This organization has so much potential because of what it represents in terms of family, relationships with allies, and also for the connections to our loved ones who are in the LGBT community. So that's why I'm here. I will continue to be part of that struggle that hopefully we will all go through together. But let's talk about why PFLAG should be involved in some of the things that Jean has led us forward on, and outreach to the community of color. PFLAG is an organization that, as we all know and love, is focused on family, working with allies and members of the LGBT community, because we want to reach the day when our loved ones are treated with equality and dignity. And we live today in a time which is a very toxic environment. We still have many challenges that our loved ones face. And notwithstanding the success that happened for marriage equality, and fellow board members will tell you, when that decision came down and we were having a discussion at a board meeting, I expressed my concerns, mindful of the history of civil rights, and this is a civil rights and human rights struggle that we are involved with. Let's make no mistake about that. But unfortunately, what it does is bring those people who are against our cause more out of the woodwork, and that has happened. I mean, let's just be candid. So whether we're talking about housing discrimination, whether we're talking about employment discrimination, whether we're talking about efforts to prevent adoptions, whether we're talking about violence, transgender rights, whether we're talking about suicide rates for teens, whether we're talking about access to health care, the list goes on. Our loved ones continue to be subject to many challenges, and we need to work together to ensure that we work together so that they can meet those challenges. We're not going to be able to reach the goals of PFLAG unless we work together. That does not, and that means not a select few people from one community. It means that we need all allies, all family, and all members of the LGBT community working together in a way that we strategize both politically, financially, and we make sure people understand the importance of this struggle, both from a human rights and civil rights perspective. So that's the why. And I don't think we should ever forget that, because too often we jump to, well, we should do it because it's the right thing to do. It is the right thing to do, but frankly, strategically, it's the only thing we can and should do. So I don't want to lose focus of that. So what has PFLAG done in order to accomplish that goal? And I would sum it up in one word: intentionality. The board, National PFLAG, is focused on an intentional strategy for outreach. And one of the things that we've done that I think is very critical is we've tried to model the behavior that we want others to adopt. So what do I mean? One of the first things we did was training. We engaged in diversity, inclusion training focused on unconscious bias, so we could check ourselves in terms of things that we collectively had to deal with, because you cannot engage with others if you're not in check with yourself and the issues that you have. We also focused on the issue of representation, right? Because if we want to reach out to folks others in a different community, we have to not only talk it, we have to walk it. We have to show them that they are welcome at the PFLAG table. So in that regard, the board, I'm proud to say now, is approximately 29% people of color, and the staff is approximately 45% people of color. So we focused on that. We've done outreach to organizations that represent persons of color. My fellow board member Marchman has made tremendous efforts in reach out to the Pan-Asian community, and we're making strides there. We, as Jean noted, we started a collaboration this weekend with the NAACP. We've also had conversations with the National Urban League. In addition, and importantly, we've put online on PFLAG Academy a number of webinars focused on outreach to the community of color. So we've done a number of things to demonstrate that this effort is more than just talk, it's serious. Yet, I do think that for some, we've done these things, and some people may say, well, where are the persons of color? We've made this effort, this outreach, why aren't they here? And then there's another word that we need to think about, and that's intersectionality. And there, what I'm talking about is that while the things we have done collectively as an organization is what I would say a good start, it's part of a long journey. We need to understand that for people in a community of color, sexual orientation, sexual identification may not be their priority. They are concerned, frankly, about their safety. Now, you can't even be in your apartment without being shot as an African-American man. So there's concerns about violence, there's concerns about equality in education. There are other priorities that that community, my community, has that may not align with the white community. And we need to have those discussions to think about that. And I want to just read for you, in preparing for this presentation, I wanted to get us to understand the sentiment of concern from the community of color and issues that are dealt with within the LGBT community. So there was a school teacher who recently came out. It was a very difficult decision, but he wanted to come out because he wanted to be in a position to be supportive for African American youth and men in the community. And this is what he said in terms of the issues he had to deal with and why he didn't immediately come out. And the individual's name is Garrett Hamilton. He's an educator. And he said, this is what he said. At this stage in the nation's history, I strongly believe that we must build respect and support for LGBT students and teachers. But in minority schools, where students are faced with the debilitating effects of racism and poverty, issues of gay pride and inclusion seem less relevant. Teachers and students of color are still fighting to be accepted by society. They do not always want to add an additional reason to have people discriminate against them. So this is a challenge that we're going to face. It's something that we're going to need to be cognizant of. Frankly, in our discussions with the NAACP, which were, in my view, very constructive and productive, that was something that was raised in terms of being mindful of the issues that folks have to face in their community. And he also raised the issue and Jean alluded to it, and I love Jean because she's always very candid about, frankly, the complexion of PFLAG. The face of PFLAG has been, and we're changing that, but in the community of color, by and large, it's white, and it hasn't been welcoming. Not intentionally as a board member, and frankly, being with all you people of goodwill, I know it's not intentional, but we have to be mindful that is the message that we are sending, unintentionally, that you're not welcome. We're trying to change that, and it's going to take time, but we have to stay on top of that. So how do we confront those challenges, which are not intractable? I will tell you, I believe that we're in the right path. So we need to think about things outside the box in terms of working, doing the outreach, meeting the mission and goals of PFLAG. Things like, does our chapter model work in all communities? We need to have flexibility with regard to making sure that we're providing people with options to become part of the family. Are our chapters representative of the community that we want to reach out to? Do we need to think about adopting a model that we have in corporate America, which is called employee resource groups, where you have people of like characteristics focused on a similar goal, working toward the same end? Now, that's something that people have to wrap their head around, because you may have a situation in the city where you have 2 PFLAG chapters, but at the end of the day, if that gets us where we need to be in the long run, that's something that we need to think about. How can we do outreach and take advantage of technology? So these are things that we need to think about. And I think as for the national board and for the chapters, and I will say for the chapters, and I respect the work and appreciate the work of the chapters, the national board cannot dictate to you what your community should do, what it looks like. There are many different characteristics, many different strategies that you need to adopt. We should have an overall strategy, because again, it's part of our mission. And we need ideas, we need to continue to have the dialogue. And by the way, part of that dialogue is important, because looking at it from the other side, I will tell you, in the community of color, at times there is the perception, and this is driven by media, that a white gay person has no issues, that they are readily accepted, and that's not the case. I can tell you that personally, from dear friends that I know. So I think at the end of the day, when we start the dialogue, we open up the doors of communication, what ends up happening is that we see that we really have more in common than differences. And that's what we need to work for. And we need to work for, we get a point where we do this, when we're looking at each other as equals, understanding that in society, unfortunately, there are a system set up where it's tiered, and we want to move away from that. And when we do our outreach, we're doing it out of love, we're doing it out of support, but we're also doing it in recognition that this group, other people, can work, give their time, give their ideas to us to help us get to where we all want to get for our loved ones at the end of the day. So the question, as we're going through this challenge, we should think about is this: how does PFLAG create a safe space to authentically, and I want to underscore authentically, welcome persons of color into the PFLAG family? So as we're strategizing, we need to think about that. And I will tell you, at the national, while it hasn't been something that we have put out, I will tell you that's been driving what we do. So, at the end of the day, I will say that I am optimistic. I have no other choice, given who I am in this society. Daily reminded of that. I will just share a story with you with regard to the issues that I still deal with, notwithstanding being last week, and I'm on the board of trustees of my alma mater. I drove out to Western Pennsylvania to deal with a racial issue on campus. I was asked to come out, and I did. But I will tell you, as I was driving out, I had to be concerned because of the car I was driving. Would I be stopped by the police because of who was driving the car? And what would be the consequences of that? So that was kind of something that was on my mind for 6 hours going and 6 hours coming back. And frankly, that's something that a number of people don't have to deal with. So I just want to put things in perspective in terms of the issues, and we should candidly talk about them and understand that they exist, and it's not fake news, it's real. So at the end of the day, Again, I'm optimistic. I think we're on the right course. I would encourage us to continue to do the things that we're doing. And I would just say this, in thinking boldly, as Gene, you had said, wouldn't it be wonderful if PFLAG is the organization that leads our society forward through our focus on love, family, and equality to bridge some of the racial barriers that are tearing this country apart. So I leave you with that, and I thank you for your time, and it's a privilege to be on the board. I thank you.